Yesterday you saw the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, taking questions from journalists, explaining he was not yet ready to take action against the Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize. The Daily Maverick website reported that Mkhize's former personal assistant, Tahira Mata's company, Digital Vibes, was paid 150 million rand by the Health Department to run communications. In some cases, this meant the company invoiced, in one case, 3 million rand just to arrange an interview on the SABC. Mkhize said that an investigation has found the contract was awarded irregularly. He denies any wrongdoing on his part. Chris Vick is the chair of the organisation COVID Comms, a group of communicators who've been offering their services to government and, frankly, to anyone during COVID-19. Chris, good afternoon to you. I mean, is there any option here? Can Mkhize stay, or does he have to go, in your view?
I think he has to go. I guess it's how and when. As you know, President Ramaphosa is a stickler for process, so he's made it very clear he's going to wait for the SIU investigation to be completed at the end of this month. But in the meantime, it just gets worse and worse. I mean, the revelations about a bakkie for the minister's son, the revelations about paying for alterations to his home. And I think at some point, both the president and the minister have to think about what people in my business call the optics. And the optics is basically, so how does it look? And it doesn't look good. I mean, the sort of drip feeding the information doesn't look good for the minister or for a president who's very committed, or so he says, to cracking down on corruption. It doesn't look good when the minister doesn't pitch up in parliament to answer questions, hiding behind a legal investigation. It doesn't look good that it's not being managed. And sadly, yet again, it's the people of South Africa who are suffering. Government's eye is being distracted from the importance of the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine and the pandemic, and it's having to deal with this issue. And I think that is the biggest concern. But right now, we need all hands on deck, all minds focused on what the key challenges are. And we don't need this kind of distraction. And the best way to deal with the distraction is for him to step out of the public light.
How important is, so what we want to do is we want to vaccinate as many people as possible. We've got a third wave. I mean, one of Gauteng's biggest hospitals, Charlotte Maxeke, is still closed. By every definition of the word in the world of communications and generally, we're living through a time of crisis. I would imagine credibility is very important during that time of crisis.
It's crucial. And I think the trust deficit between the public and government has gradually been chipped away. You know, the way the lockdown was first announced, those terrible, bumbling ministerial press conferences didn't build public confidence. Then there was the PPE scandal, or the first PPE scandal. I mean, there's another one around the South African Police Service. Shortly after that, there were challenges around procuring vaccines that arrived and were then turned back, and then hiccups with the electronic vaccine registration system. All of these things eat away at public confidence. But I must say, when push comes to shove, when people get that SMS or where they get an indication that a walk-in is possible, they still seem to be going to get the vaccines. But it's not the ideal situation to have in the middle of a pandemic, a public health crisis, where you want the public to have complete confidence in the state and its ability to roll out mechanisms and keep society together and keep the economy growing. Not ideal in a situation like that to have these constant attacks on public confidence, because they do increase the trust deficit. And I mean, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know the detail of the Digital Vibes thing. They don't know the level of grand theft that seems to have gone on there. But it's just another tick on the box. It says, can we trust this government to roll out vaccines as effectively as possible and to look after us? And I think, I'm sorry to kind of push it, but I think the public health system really seems to have been a little bit more creaky than it was before the COVID-19 pandemic, with the fires, the water shortages. The entire system is under pressure, which again doesn't increase public confidence in the public health system.
So there are all sorts of ways to sort of, you know, manage this politically and to manage the optics. Is it better for the minister to resign than to be pushed? Maybe a sort of managed resignation, if I could call it that.
Well, I guess the question is better for who? I think probably better for society, better for South Africa. I don't know necessarily better for the ANC. And I mean, you know as well as I do, the ANC political culture is to hold on to this phrase of innocent until proven guilty. And I think that's to its detriment right now. I think in the interest of society, it would be quite refreshing and send a very good signal if a minister who is facing so many questions was to fall on his sword, to step aside, even if it's to take special leave. At least it indicates a responsiveness to the crisis and a responsiveness to the concern that exists. But I do think it's going to take a bit longer. Who knows what else the Daily Maverick has up its sleeve? Maybe one more revelation will be enough to sort of get a decision. But it's got to come quickly, because I don't think South Africa is prepared to wait until the end of June for the SIU investigation.
There's also the question of who would take over. Now, how important is their credibility, the optics of them? I mean, there's several names that seem to be in the frame. Professor Mkhize Ntlatiana from the University of Johannesburg suggested yesterday. Dr. Sibukusene Dlomo, he's also from KwaZulu-Natal, that might help the ANC. There are two previous health ministers in cabinet, actually, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi or Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. I mean, would they take over with credibility, or does their time actually in that portfolio and others detract from their credibility?
Well, it could be a temporary situation. I mean, I think that a cabinet reshuffle is long overdue. I mean, there are vacant posts that need to be filled. There have been changes in the political environment. But we also mustn't forget that, in a sense, that political figureheads, it could be Dr. Motsoaledi, it could be Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Even Deputy Minister Joe Pahla, who's been a Deputy Minister of Health since 2014, I think, has really good experience and he's a medical practitioner, has really good experience. I don't think that there's a shortage of options. It's that initial decision that needs to be taken, that the minister either needs to go or be made to go. And that's the bullet that there seems to be some real reservation over. The replacement is almost a secondary issue. I think what we're looking for is some political stability, and that's what you don't have right now. So if it was to be one of the options that you've mentioned, there might be questions about the way they've run the department in the past, but it would be a temporary position, and it would at least bring some kind of stability, not just to the political leadership, but to that huge department that has such an important project to carry out in managing the pandemic and implementing the vaccine rollout.
Chris, I do want to ask you another question, if I may, around optics and communication, something that you're an expert in. I mean, as you and I speak to each other, there's no load shedding in South Africa. We were due to have load shedding until later tonight, and then that was going to be it. Load shedding, for now, was going to be over until, the next edition. But then Parliament made a request to Eskom to suspend load shedding so that it could have a virtual meeting to pass certain appropriations bills. Eskom says it's agreed to do that because it understands that Parliament needs these bills to be passed. As a result of that, there'll be load shedding through the weekend when there wasn't going to be load shedding through the weekend. What kind of message does that send?
Well, if we had a hard-working, productive Parliament that we felt was holding the political leadership accountable, I think that South Africa might be a little bit more indulgent of a request like that. If we had an Eskom that stuck to its word about when load shedding will or won't happen, I think it would have been better received. But you've got this kind of culmination of an institution that doesn't particularly look like it's working hard and effectively, and a state utility that isn't completely transparent about power supply and load shedding. It's a terrible clash of two institutions whose credibility is already being questioned. And I mean, the noise I saw on social media, the sort of, we just cannot believe it, I mean, why couldn't Parliament meet this morning, for example, to pass this important legislation? Why is Eskom able to make this sort of adjustment for 3 hours so that particularly crucial legislation can be passed? Why wasn't that legislation passed earlier? It really sends optics bad, credibility worse than ever before. And I do think that there's almost a kind of impunity that started to develop around the people who make decisions like this, in that they don't think of the consequence on people's lives. They don't think of the impact that it has on perceptions of very, very important institutions. I mean, we have to have faith in Parliament as a place that does its work and does its work on schedule, not an institution that wakes up in the morning and says, oh no, we can't have load shedding. We have to pass some crucial legislation. The knock-on effects of this and the impact on public confidence couldn't have come at a worse time, and it couldn't have sent a worse signal around two institutions that really aren't managing what they're supposed to be dealing with.
Chris Vick, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. The chair of COVID Comms, a communications expert. Thanks very much indeed on a Friday afternoon on Newsfeed. Well,